Hello, we are reading The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Today we're going to read chapters 3 and 4. Curly and The Law of Fang. Curly and Buck were taken below deck by Perrault and handed over to a large man called Francois. Both men were French-Canadian, tan and weathered from Klondike life. This was a new kind of man to Buck. He did not befriend them, but he grew to respect them. He soon learned that Perrault and Francois were fair men, but too wise in the ways of dogs to be fooled by dogs. Between decks, Buck and Curly joined two other dogs. One was a big, snow-white fellow from Spitzbergen, who had been brought away by a whaling captain. He was friendly, but not to be trusted. Spitz, as he was called, would smile while he planned some sneaky tricks. And he would indeed proved himself to be sneaky. When he stole from Buck's food on the first meal, Buck sprang to punish him. Just then, the lash of Francois's whip sang through the air, reaching the white dog first. Buck observed that this, at least, was fair treatment from this man with the whip. The other dog was called Dave. He was a quiet fellow who wanted to be left alone. His eyes told the others that there would be trouble if he were bothered. When the boat rolled and pitched, Buck and Curly became half wild with fear. But Dave merely raised his head as though annoyed, glanced their way, yawned, and went to sleep again. There's Dave. At last, one morning the boat came to a stop. The excitement of change was in the air. Francois leashed the dogs and brought them onto the deck. At the first step upon the cold deck, Buck's feet sank into white mushy something, very like mud. He sprang back with a snort. More of this white stuff was falling through the air. He shook himself, but more of it fell upon him. He sniffed it curiously, then licked some up on his tongue. It bit like fire. The next instant, it was gone. This puzzled him. The men laughed, and he felt ashamed. This was the first time he had ever seen snow. Buck's first day on the shore was like a nightmare. Every hour was filled with shock and surprise. No lazy, sunny life was this. Here there was no peace, nor rest, nor a moment's safety, only confusion and danger. Buck knew he must stay alert. They were savages, all of them. They knew no law but the law of the club and the fang. He had never seen dogs fight how these wolfish dogs fought. Buck soon learned an awful lesson about life in these wild parts, and Curly the Newfoundland was the victim. They were camped near the log store, where Curly, in her friendly way, walked up to a husky dog the size of a full-grown wolf. With no warning, the husky leaped in like a flash, sank his teeth into Curly, then leaped back, almost in one motion. It was the wolf way of fighting, strike and leap away. Yet, there was more to the wolf way than this. 30 or 40 huskies ran to the spot and surrounded the two dogs in a silent circle. Buck did not understand this silent circle, nor why they were licking their chops. Curly rushed the husky, who struck again and leaped aside. He met her next rush with his chest and tumbled her off her feet. She never got back up. This was what the circle of huskies had waited for. They closed in upon her, snarling and yelping in mass attack. Within seconds, Curly was dead. Buck was shocked by the sudden, brutal act. He saw Spitz's stick out his red tongue in a way he had of laughing. Then he saw Francois swinging an axe, spring into the mess of dogs. 3 men with clubs were helping him to scatter them. It did not take long. The wild huskies were driven off, and there lay Curly, limp and lifeless in the snow. This memory often came back to Buck to trouble him in his sleep. So that was the way, no fair play. Once down, that was the end of you. Well, he would not see it, and he never went down. Spitz stuck his tongue and laughed again. But the moment Buck hated him with a bitter and deep hatred. Chapter 4. The Team. Long before Buck received another shock, Francois walked over to him with something made of leather straps. He then buckled and fastened them upon Buck. It was a harness. Buck had often seen these harnesses put on horses back home, on Judge Miller's estate. These horses were then put to work, something Buck had never been used to. Yet now he was set to work pulling Francois on a sled to the forest with a load of firewood. Buck had become a work animal. His pride suffered a blow, and though this was new and strange, he was determined to do his best. Buck began the middle member of the 3-dog sled team. He soon learned that order and teamwork were necessary. Francois was stern and taught the dogs to obey with his whip. Dave had worked on a team before and was an experienced wheeler, holding the position closest to the sled. He nipped at Buck's hind legs whenever he was in air. Spitz was the lead dog, and he growled sharply now and again and threw his weight into the 2 straps, the traces that linked all the dogs. Buck learned easily and made good progress. Before they returned to camp, he knew enough to stop at hoe, to go ahead at mush or swing wide on the bends, and to be clear of the wheeler when the loaded sled shot downhill on their heels. 3 very good dogs, Francois told Perrault. That Buck, him can pull. I teach him quick as anything. By afternoon, Perrault returned with 2 more dogs, Billy and Joe. He called them. They were brothers and true huskies both, yet different as day and night. Billy was very friendly, while Joe was sour and silent, with an evil eye. Buck was friendly to both dogs, and Dave ignored them. Spitz wanted to prove who was leader from the start. When Billy wagged his tail at Spitz, the white dog attacked him, sinking sharp teeth into the husky's flank. Then Spitz circled Joe. Billy had fled, but Joe whirled around on his heels to face Spitz, ears laid back, lips snarling, jaws clipped together, and eyes gleaming in stubborn fear. By evening, Perrault brought another dog, an old thin husky with 1 good eye. He was called Solix, which means angry one. Like Dave, he asked nothing, gave nothing, and commanded respect. Even Spitz left him alone. Solix did not like to be approached on his blind side. Buck was unlucky enough to discover this. Solix whirled upon Buck and slashed his shoulder to the bone when Buck walked up to the side with a bad eye. After this, Buck avoided his blind side and had no more trouble. That night, Buck faced the great problem of sleeping out in freezing cold. The tent was lit by candle and glowed warmly. Buck walked into the warm tent, but both Perrault and Francois yelled and threw plates and cups at him till he fled into the outer cold. He lay down on the snow and attempted to sleep, but he was shivering. Sadly, he wandered among the many tents. Each place was as cold as another. Finally, an idea came to him. He would return and see how his teammates were making out. To his surprise, they had all disappeared. Again, he wandered through the great camp looking for them, and again he returned. Were they in the tent? No, that could not be, else he would not have been driven out. Then where could they possibly be? With a drooping tail and a shivering body, he circled the tent. Suddenly the snow gave way beneath his forelegs, and he sank down. Something wriggled around his feet. He sprang back, bristling and snarling, but a friendly little yelp calmed him and brought him back. There, curled up under the snow in a snug ball, lay Billy. He whined, squirmed, and wiggled to show his good will, and even licked Buck's face with warm, wet tongue. Another lesson. So that was the way they did it, eh? Buck selected a spot, and after a few tries, finally dug a hole for himself. The day had been long and hard. He slept soundly and comfortably, though he growled and barked and wrestled with bad dreams. Buck did not open his eyes until he heard the sound of a waking camp. At first, he did not know where he was. It had snowed during the night, and he was completely buried. The muscles of his whole body ached. The hair on his neck and shoulders stood at end. With a ferocious snarl, he bounded straight up into the open air, sending the snow flying. He landed on his feet and saw the camp. Then he remembered everything that had happened to him, from the stroll with Manuel, to the boat ride, to the sled team, to the hole he dug for himself the night before. "What I say," the dog driver of Francois cried to Perrault. "Dat Buck for sure learn quick as anything." Perrault nodded. The Canadian government needed the best dogs on the run. He was glad to have Buck. Three more Huskies were added to the team, making a total of 9. Before long, they were in harness and swinging up the trail away from the camp. Buck was glad to be gone. The work was hard, but he did not hate it. He was surprised at how much the other dogs enjoyed the work. They were all eager to get down the trail. Dave was wheeler, or sled dog. Pulling in front of him was Buck. Then came Solix. The rest of the team went sprung ahead, single file, to leader Spritz. Buck had been placed between Dave and Solix to be taught the way of the team. When he needed instruction, he received a sharp nip or a pull in the traces. That day, they made 40 miles on the snow-packed trail. The next few days, they had to blaze a new trail, which was harder work and more time. Perrault traveled ahead of the team, packing the snow with webbed shoes to make it easier for them. Francois usually guided the sled with the gee pole. Perrault was in a hurry, but he knew the danger in rushing into the thin autumn ice. Day after day, Buck toiled in the traces. Always they broke camp in the dark of the early hours. At the first gray of dawn, they were hitting the trail. After dark, the men pitched the tent. The dogs ate their bit of fish and crawled to sleep into the snow. Buck was starving. His pound and a half of sun-dried salmon was not enough food for his achy belly. The other dogs weighed less and were born to this life. A pound only of fish kept them in good condition. Buck watched and learned. When he saw Pike, one of the new dogs, slyly steal a slice of bacon from Perrault's back when Perrault's back was turned, he copied the trick. The following day, getting away with a whole chunk. An uproar was raised, but Buck was not suspected. Dub, who'd always been getting caught, was blamed and punished for Buck's misdeed. Buck quickly grew strong and wise. His muscles became as hard as iron, and he grew used to pain. He would eat anything, no matter how disgusting. He learned to bite the ice out of his teeth when it collected between his toes. When he was thirsty, the ice was thick over a water hole. He would strike and break it with stiff forelegs. His sense of smell and sense of hearing became very keen. His instincts came alive within him, the instincts of the wild, the instincts of his nature. On the quiet, cold nights, he pointed his nose at the stars and howled long and wolf-like. The old song of his ancient ancestors ran through him, and he began to discover the primitive beast within him. A Buck he never knew, a Buck that had come alive, all because men had found gold in the north and because Manuel was a greedy man. So, Buck is now a member of a sled team, and he is blazing a trail. He's learning that he has instincts. For instance, his instinct to follow his other teammates to find out how they slept without freezing. Also, his sneakiness and getting the bacon and not getting caught, which seems wrong, but when you're trying to survive, sometimes you have to do some things you normally wouldn't do. So he's learning about his nature, and as you know, the nature of the dog is a wolf. They're wild, and he was just a house dog, but he has a lot of energy, and he's trying to work hard, and he's a great character. So today, my quote is, "You are braver than you believe, and stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." So with that, I'm going to sign off, and I just noticed I spelled R-A-R. Some things never change, right? A-R-E. I know it's A-R-E, but I just wrote it wrong. So hopefully, if you're my class, you know that happens sometimes, and we all make mistakes. So I hope you join me next time for the next 2 chapters of the book. We are through chapter 4. So have a good day. See ya.